Welcome friends. Today I am going to discuss the topic Introduction to Diseases Caused by Microbes. The main objectives of this lecture will be Introduction to Microorganisms, Overview of Infectious Diseases, Types of Infectious Organisms, Development of Infection and the Defenses Against Infection. Firstly, Introduction to Microorganisms. A microbe, another word for a microorganism, is a tiny individual, living thing that is way too small to be seen by the human eye alone. The only way this tiny organism can be seen is by using a microscope. This is why microbes are often called microscopic organisms. These organisms are found almost everywhere you can think of here on earth, in air, water, soil and rock, and even in plants, animals and the human body. Some microbes can live in very hot temperatures and others can live in the freezing cold. Some need oxygen to grow and stay alive while others survive without it. Microbes are the oldest form of life on earth. Some types have existed for billions of years. They may live as individuals or cluster together in communities. Microorganisms play a very important role in our lives. Some microbes cause disease, but the majority are completely harmless. In fact, we couldn't live without them, but they could live without us. These microscopic organisms play a key role in maintaining life on Earth, fixing gases and breaking down dead plants and animal matter into simpler substances that are used at the beginning of the food chain. Biotechnologists can also exploit the activities of microorganisms to benefit humans, such as in the production of medicines, enzymes, and food. They are also used to break down sewage and other toxic wastes into safe matter. This process is called bioremediation. Microbes are very small living organisms, so small that most of them are invisible. The majority can only be seen with a microscope, which magnifies their image so we can see them. In fact, microbes are so tiny you would find over 1 million in a teaspoon of soil. They make up more than 60% of the Earth's living matter, and scientists estimate that 23 billion species share the planet with us. Microbes in the healthy human body. The outer ear contains Aspergillus, a fungus. Skin contains Candida, which is also a fungus. Small intestine contains Clostridium. The intestines contain Escherichia coli. Stomach has a Lactobacillus. Urethra has Microbacterium. Nose, Staphylococcus aureus, and mouth contains Streptococcus salivarius. The large intestines has Trichomonas protozoa. Microorganisms are mostly harmless and non-pathogenic, and indeed may be beneficial. It is estimated that a human body carries approximately 10 raised by 14 cells, but only 10% of these are human in origin. The rest is microbial flora. There is not a consensus definition of a microbe, but broadly speaking, they are organisms which are not visible to the naked eye. There is a vast array of agents that are capable of causing human disease. A family tree of all living organisms is shown here in the following figure. This tree, with its 3 main branches, is very different from that suggested in the 1980s and has come about because of advances in molecular biology. The eukaryotic domain is a single group with almost unbelievable diversity, from single-celled amoebae through worms, fungi, and plants right up to the complex animals such as humans. The prokaryotes are divided up into 2 fundamentally separate domains, the archaea and bacteria. But just because many bacteria look the same under the microscope, it does not follow that they will behave similarly. Indeed, there is as much difference between the genes of the bacteria Treponema pallidum and Staphylococcus aureus as there is between those of humans and sweet corn. Now, archaea. The archaea are a group of prokaryotes that live in extreme conditions such as thermal pools. While they may be very important to the health of natural environments, they are not known to cause human infection. Bacteria. These are very significant when it comes to human health both because some of them must live on us or in us if we are to remain healthy, that is our commensal flora, and because some of them are capable of causing disease. Eukarya. This group has larger, more diverse and complicated cells and includes fungi, that is yeasts and molds, and parasites which may be single-celled protozoa and helminths. Then viruses, viroids and prions. These are not truly living agents but are transmissible and able to replicate. Now the cell. The cell is the fundamental organizational unit of all living systems, including microorganisms. It provides the essential basis for organization, growth, metabolism, reproduction and heredity, which are the critical functions that comprise the essential characteristics of life. There are two different types of cells of living organisms. Prokaryotic cells, that are cells lacking a nucleus, for example bacteria, and eukaryotic cells, these are the cells with a nucleus like protozoa, algae and fungi. All cells have some common properties regardless of whether their organizational structure is prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Cells of all organisms are highly organized, are capable of growth and reproduction, contains the same hereditary molecule, that is DNA. Now the prokaryotic cell. The prokaryotic cell is most primitive and simple than eukaryotic cell. It does not have membrane bound compartments called organelles that serve specialized functions as occurs in eukaryotic cells. A prokaryotic cell does not have a nucleus, and the heredity information, that is DNA, of a prokaryotic cell is not separated from the other constituents within the specialized organelle from the rest of the contents is of prime importance in distinguishing prokaryotic from eukaryotic cells. All bacterial cells invariably have a cell membrane, cell pool, ribosomes and chromatin bodies. The majority have a cell wall and some form of surface coating or glycocalyx. Specific structures that are found in some but not all are flagella, capsules, slime layers and granules. Flagella. The primary function of flagella is to confer motility or self-propulsion, that is, the capacity of a cell to swim freely through an aqueous habitat. As the flagellum rotates, it causes the cell body to spin in the opposite direction and gives the cell a forward motion. The cell envelope. The cell envelope is the complex of layers external to the cell protoplasm. The layers of the envelope are stacked one upon another and are often tightly bounded together. The three basic layers that can be identified are the glycocalyx, the cell wall and the cell membrane. Now functions of the cell membrane. Firstly, to regulate transport, that is, the passage of nutrients into cell and the discharge of wastes. Secondly, enzyme excretion. The enzymes of the respiration are located at the membrane. Macromolecules like carbohydrate, proteins and fat cannot permeate through the cell membrane. The enzyme is needed to break the macromolecules. Now cell membrane provides a site for the functions such as energy reactions, nutrient processing and synthesis. Now protoplasm. Protoplasm is a prominent site for many of the cell's biochemical and synthetic activities. Its major component is water, about 70 to 80%, which serves as a solvent for the cell pool, a complex mixture of nutrients including sugars, amino acids and salts. The components of this pool serve as building blocks for cell synthesis or as sources of energy. Also contains larger discrete cell masses such as the chromatin body, ribosomes, mesosomes and granules. Chromatin bodies. The hereditary material of bacteria exists in the form of a single circular strand of DNA designated as the chromatin body or bacterial chromosome. By definition, bacteria do not have a nucleus, that is, their DNA is not enclosed by a nuclear membrane but instead is aggregated in a dense area of the cell called the nucleoid. Ribosomes. A bacterial cell contains thousands of tiny discrete units called ribosomes. Ribosomes are where the protein synthesis is performed. Now, cytoplasmic inclusions or granules. Inclusion bodies or granules contain condensed energy like rich organic substance including glycogen, fat and phosphate. Bacterial endospore. Only certain bacteria have endospores. This type of bacteria is called an endospore because it is produced inside a cell. Endospore is formed when the environment is not suitable for the bacteria to reproduce. Eukaryotic cell. All eukaryotic microbial cells have a protoplasmic membrane, nucleus, mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, vacuoles and cytoskeleton. A cell wall, locomotor appendages, chloroplasts and glycocalyx are found only in some groups. The flagella. The eukaryotic flagellum is thicker, structurally more complex and covered by an extension of the cell membrane. The surface structures. There are three basic layers. Firstly, glycocalyx. It is an outermost boundary that comes in direct contact with the environment. This structure is usually composed of polysaccharides. The glycocalyx contributes to protection, adherence of cells to the surfaces and reception of signals from other cells and from the environment. The cell wall. Cell walls of algal and fungal cells are rigid and provide structural support and shape. Fungal cell walls have a thick inner layer of polysaccharide fibers composed of chitin or cellulose and a thin outer layer of mixed glycans. Cytoplasmic membrane. The cytoplasmic membrane of eukaryotic cells is a typical bilayer of lipids in which protein molecules are embedded, which also contains sterols. Now the nucleus. The nucleus is the cell control center. The nucleus is a compact sphere that is the most prominent organelle of eukaryotic cells. It is separated from the cell cytoplasm by an external boundary called a nuclear envelope. Nucleus contains chromosomes that bring the genetic information, that is the DNA. In the nucleus, the nucleolus produces components that are used to build protein. Endoplasmic reticulum. There are two kinds of endoplasmic reticulum, rough endoplasmic reticulum also called RER and smooth endoplasmic reticulum called SER. The rough endoplasmic reticulum originates from the nucleus membrane and extends in a continuous network through the cytoplasm even to the cell membrane. This is to permit the rough endoplasmic reticulum to transport materials from the nucleus to the cytoplasm. The rough endoplasmic reticulum appears rough because of the large numbers of ribosomes partly attached to its membrane. Proteins are synthesized on the ribosomes. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum is a closed tubular network within ribosomes that functions in nutrient processing and synthesis and storage of non-protein macromolecules such as lipids, sterols and glycogen. Now ribosomes, these are the protein synthesizers. Ribosomes are numerous tiny particles and distributed in two ways. Firstly, some are scattered freely in cytoplasm and secondly, others associated with the rough endoplasmic reticulum as previously described. Next is the mitochondria. The function of mitochondria is to supply energy. Respiration process in the cristae, that is inner membranes, extract energy from the nutrient molecules and stores it in the form of high energy molecules or ATP called adenosine triphosphate cristae. Chloroplasts. The chloroplasts are only found in algae and plant cells that are capable of converting the energy of sunlight into chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. Golgi complex. This organelle is always closely associated with the endoplasmic reticulum, both in its location and function. Some microbes cause disease in humans, plants and animals. Others are essential for a healthy life and we could not exist without them. Indeed, the relationship between microorganisms and humans is delicate and complex. Since the 19th century, we have known that microorganisms cause infectious diseases. Near the end of the 20th century, researchers began to learn that microbes also contribute to many chronic diseases and illnesses. Now, overview of infectious diseases. Microbes have probably always caused infection and disease in humans. Since ancient times, historians have documented some of those diseases. Present-day archaeologists and microbiologists are discovering evidences of infectious disease in prehistoric human skeletons. In a fascinating find in the late 20th century, researchers uncovered evidence that prehistoric humans were troubled by microbial parasites and used natural remedies against them. Along with the frozen mummy of the Iceman, who was found in the mountains of northern Italy and lived between 3300 and 3100 BC, scientists found a type of tree fungus containing oils that are toxic to intestinal parasites. Later in the laboratory, researchers found the eggs of a microscopic parasitic intestinal roundworm, Trichuris trichura, that is whipworm, in his intestines. Smallpox, which is caused by a variola virus, was described in ancient Egyptian and Chinese writings. According to some researchers, over the centuries, smallpox was responsible for more deaths than all other infectious diseases combined. It killed millions of people over thousands of years before being eradicated late in the 20th century by worldwide vaccination. The late case of naturally occurring smallpox was recorded in 1977. Now, the development of infection. Infectious diseases are usually caused by microorganisms that invade the body and multiply. Invasion by most microorganisms begins when they adhere to cells in a person's body. Adherence is a very specific process involving lock and key connections between the microorganism and cells in the body. Being able to adhere to the surfaces of a cell enables microorganisms to establish a base from which to invade tissues. Whether the microorganism remains near the invasion site or spreads to other sites and how severe the infection is depends on such factors as whether it produces toxins, enzymes or other substances, whether it develops resistance to antimicrobial drugs, whether it can block the body's defense mechanisms, and how well the person's immune system is functioning. Some microorganisms that invade the body produce toxins. For example, the bacterium Clostridium tetani in infected wound produce a toxin that causes tetanus. Some diseases are caused by toxins produced by microorganisms outside the body. For example, Staphylococci bacteria living in food may produce a toxin that produces food poisoning when the food is eaten, even if the Staphylococci have been killed. Most toxins contain components that bind specifically with molecules on certain cells, that is, target cells. Toxins play a central role in such diseases as tetanus, toxic shock syndrome, botulism, anthrax, and cholera. After invading the body, microorganisms must multiply to cause infection. After multiplication begins, one of three things can happen. Firstly, microorganisms continue to multiply and overwhelm the body's defenses. Secondly, a state of balance is achieved causing chronic infection. And last, the body, with or without medical treatment, destroys and eliminates the invading microorganism. Many disease-causing microbes have properties that increase the severity of the diseases they cause, that is, the virulence, and help them resist the body's defense mechanisms. Some microorganisms have ways of blocking the body's defense mechanisms, such as, firstly, interfering with the body's production of antibodies or T cells, which are specifically armed to attack the microorganisms. Second, being enclosed in protective outer coats capsules that prevent white blood cells from ingesting the microorganisms. For example, the fungus Cryptococcus actually develops a thicker capsule after it enters the lungs for the specific purpose of resisting the body's defenses. Resistance of being split open, that is lysed by the substances circulating in the bloodstream. And last but not the least, producing substances that counter the effects of antibiotics. Some bacteria can produce a layer of slime called biofilm that helps them to attach to cells and to foreign materials such as IV catheters, suture material and medical implants and devices. The biofilm protects bacteria from being ingested by immune cells and being killed by antibiotics. In order to cause disease, the microorganisms must enter the human body, stick to specific human cells and tissues and grow and replicate. This first step is important for pathogens from the outside environment. Once bound, these microorganisms will begin growing and replicating. Some pathogens will simply steal nutrients from the surrounding environment. Other pathogens will invade the host cell and hijack the host cell's nutrients or cellular machinery. This may cause host cells to die or malfunction, making us sick. Furthermore, some pathogens produce toxins as they grow, which can also make us ill. Now, what are the defenses against infection? Physical barriers and the immune system defend the body against organisms that can cause infection. Physical barriers include the skin, mucous membranes, tears, airwax, mucus and stomach acid. Also, the normal flow of urine washes out microorganisms that enter the urinary tract. The immune system uses white blood cells and antibodies to identify and eliminate organisms that get through the body's physical barriers. Now, what are the physical barriers? Usually, the skin prevents invasion by microorganisms unless it is damaged, for example by an injury, insect bite or a burn. Other effective physical barriers are mucous membranes such as the lining of the mouth, nose and eyelids. Typically, mucous membranes are coated with secretions that fight microorganisms. For example, the mucous membranes of the eyes are bathed in tears which contain an enzyme called lysozyme that attacks bacteria and helps protect the eyes from infection. The airways filter out particles that are present in the air that is inhaled. The walls of the passages in the nose and airways are coated with mucus. Microorganisms in the air become stuck to the mucus, which is coughed up or blown out of the nose. Mucus removal is aided by the coordinated beating of tiny hair-like projections called cilia that line the airways. The cilia sweep the mucus up the airways away from the lungs. The digestive tract has a series of effective barriers, including stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes, bile, and intestinal secretions. The contractions of the intestine, that is peristalsis, and the normal shedding of cells lining the intestine help remove harmful microorganisms. Now, the blood. The body also defends against infection by increasing the number of certain types of white blood cells, that is neutrophils and monocytes, which engulf and destroy invading microorganisms. The increase can occur within several hours, largely because white blood cells are released from the bone marrow where they are made. The number of neutrophils increases first, and sometimes with an increase in immature forms of neutrophils. If an infection persists, the number of monocytes increases. The blood carries white blood cells to sites of infection. The number of eosinophils, another type of white blood cell, increases in allergic reactions and many parasitic infections, but usually not in bacterial infections. However, certain infections such as typhoid fever, viral infections and bacterial infections that overwhelm the immune system can lead to a decrease in the white blood cell count. Now, inflammation. An injury, including an invasion by the microorganisms, causes inflammation in the affected area. Inflammation, a complex reaction, results from many different conditions. The damaged tissue releases substances that cause inflammation and that direct the immune system to do the following: wall off the area, attack and kill any invaders, dispose of dead and damaged tissue, begin the process of repair. However, inflammation may not be able to overcome large numbers of microorganisms. During inflammation, the blood supply increases. An infected area near the surface of the body becomes red and warm. Immune response. When an infection develops, the immune system responds by producing several substances and agents that are designed to attack the specific invading microorganisms. For example, the immune system may produce killer T cells, a type of white blood cells that can organize and kill the invading microorganism. Also, the immune system produces antibodies that target the specific invading microorganism. Antibodies attach to and immobilize microorganisms, killing them outright or helping neutrophils target and kill them. Now, fever. Body temperature increases as a protective response to infection and injury. An elevated body temperature, fever, enhances the body's defense mechanisms. Although it can cause discomfort, a part of the brain called the hypothalamus controls body temperature. Fever results from an actual resetting of the hypothalamus's thermostat. The body raises its temperature to a higher level by moving or shunting blood from the skin surface to the interior of the body, thus reducing heat loss. Shivering or chills may occur to increase heat production through muscle contraction. The body's efforts to conserve and produce heat continue until blood reaches the hypothalamus at the new higher temperature. The new higher temperature is then maintained. Later, when the thermostat is reset to its normal level, the body eliminates excess heat through sweating and shunting of blood to the skin. With this, we come to the end of this lecture. Hope you have enjoyed. Thank you.